Hi, welcome again and welcome to Front Centre. Welcome to Neuff Red. And I am absolutely delighted, huge privilege to have with us the man, the legend, the founder of Ventum. It is Mr. Diaa Nour. Diaa, how are you?
Wow, that was quite an introduction. I'm not sure about the legend part, but thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually very excited to speak with you today.
Cool. How are things going over there for you at the moment with obviously the current situation, which we're all talking about?
It's been challenging. We're navigating it, and we're lucky to be even more nimble, I would say, than other companies. But the supply chain, as everybody knows, is very, very disrupted. So that's created a bit more hassle, longer lead times, but we're managing. I mean, the bike business is not a bad business to be in right now in terms of the demand side. So
Yeah, it really is. And obviously we'll come on to it later on, but obviously the GS1 was quite a landmark bike, your gravel edition, to pull out at this time of year, because I think that because of the lack of racing, gravel's really taken off even over here in the UK now more than ever. Yeah, it's
absolutely
cool.
correct. Yeah, no, it's true, and it's a huge rising segment in the US as well. So
Yeah,
it was definitely a very timely release.
it was. It was. So yeah, go for it. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a bit about, kind of like what inspired you to set up Ventum.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ventum started in 2014. I was approached by one of your countrymen, Jimmy C, and his father, Peter Sear. Jimmy was a professional athlete. His sister, Maxine, went to the Olympics. They did go for Australia, though, because they went to Australia when they were a bit younger. Nobody's perfect. And they had this idea to create the world's fastest triathlon bike. Now, Jimmy and Peter's circle are all engineers, they're all into aerodynamics, they work for large aerospace companies. And it was almost like a pet project for them, because of their interest in triathlon and their kids being pros in the field. And so from there, I was just getting out of a telecom company. So I was working in an IT telecom company that I sold to the US government. And at the time, I was surrounded by the sport. My brother was a professional triathlete. My significant other at the time was a professional triathlete. So I knew I wanted to do something in the sport, but I didn't know exactly what. I even looked at events. Should I start an event? And that's when Jimmy and Peter approached me, and they showed me the designs and what they were working on. And the idea was to create or manufacture 20 to 30 of them and give them to their friends and the pros, and that was it. Now, I come from the business background, and I said, wait a minute, guys, this is a complete, unique, revolutionary product. We got to take this to market. And they said, well, we don't really know how to do that. And I said, well, I don't really know how to make a bike. This is a perfect marriage. And that's how essentially Ventum started. And I'll dig into the Ventum one in a little bit, but that's how really the whole company began. It was just perfect timing and skills that were not overlapping whatsoever. And that's what made it great. Since then, obviously, Jimmy's moved on to other things. Creators like to create, and they like to keep creating.
Yeah.
And the company's obviously grown tremendously, and it's gone from one idea and one bike to a whole lineup, and there's still so much more to go.
So, I mean, obviously going on to that, the Ventum 1, it's quite a radical design. And when it first hit the market, it's got to be said it was an eye-opener. And I know that obviously we've had additions previously, things like the Cervelo P5Xs that obviously has a down tube removed, but nothing quite looks like the Ventum 1. And I think it's a bit of a Marmite bike at times, is that people look at it and they're not sure really whether it's something that suits them. I mean, obviously, I'm afraid I'm biased. They haven't ridden one. But I mean, what was the idea behind it? What was the thinking behind the technologies that went into that?
Yes, there was a lot of technology in the Ventum 1. And the idea behind it is we felt that triathletes were being underserved. Back in the day, triathlon was a bit more of an exotic sport. People didn't know, do you swim first? Do you bike first? It was a little this out there crazy sport. Now we do have mass participation. The triathlon has become very common, different distances. There's probably one in every country I've ever been to. So the mass participation is there. Now, the technology has evolved tremendously. And you have to remember that triathlon, non-draft triathlon, is not bound by UCI. So why are we doing UCI legal frames that we know are not the most aerodynamic and putting them into triathlon? Now, back in the day, I understand, because the market segment is so small that and it's so expensive to develop these bikes. I understand if producers did not want to invest all the capex, the return would never been there. So I don't blame them at all. But now that we have the mass participation, the technology needs to catch up. And so that's what we looked at. We said, what can we do to make the fastest bike for triathletes? And that's how we started. So we started, obviously on computers and CFDs. We then did a ton of testing on the wind tunnel, and we got very, very creative. Like, for example, you look at the Ventum 1, it's a pretty radical looking bike. There's no down tube. One of the things that we've noticed is that the down tube is a horrendous angled tube when it comes to aerodynamics, specifically in crosswinds. It catches the wind and it slows you down. And so removing the down tube gave us incredible gains. So those are the thoughts that were behind it. The other thing about the down tube that people don't realize, and this might be getting a little technical, but I find it very interesting. The trailing edge of a wheel, the relationship between that and the leading edge of the down tube, and you have a beautiful NS1 behind you that I can just look at. And what happens is when you're sitting on your tri bike, you are never straight. You're always correcting your front wheel. And when you're correcting your front wheel, you are exposing the down tube, and that's creating drag. So this is, those are the things that we were thinking about on how to make the best triathlon bike possible. Now, what I just said actually will never show up on the wind tunnel, because the wind tunnel, you actually fix both the front and rear wheel. So that relationship stays the same no matter what yaw angle you're using, right? But however, in real life conditions, when we're testing, you can find out these things. And that's the thing. And that was just the start. We said, okay, well, everybody tests these bikes, what I call them naked. We put these tri bikes in the wind tunnel with not a single bottle, without a bento, without anything, because we're trying to get the fastest data, which is great for your papers, but that's not real life. We can't do an Ironman without drinking water. And we all know that bottles and bottle cages create drag. And so we said, how do we take a negative and turn it into a positive? And that's where the integrated hydration on the top tube came from. We're the only bike company to this day in the world that's faster with hydration on than off. We took a negative and turned it into a positive. And so those are the thoughts. And then and by the way, I could sit here and tell you, 3 hours worth of info on the Ventum 1. So I'll spare you. But one other thing too is the comfort level that you get on a Ventum 1. A lot of the riders will say, wow, I am so comfortable. My legs are very fresher than they've ever been for the run. How so? Well, that has a lot to do with obviously the geometry, our carbon layup, but also about how much surface area there is on the Ventum 1. So if you look at it, it's got a big canvas. What that does, it allows road vibrations to disperse over a much bigger surface area, really saving you from a lot of the shock of the harsh roads. So all these things were really thought about to make the best triathlon bike possible for triathletes. So that's kind of a brief history of the Ventum 1.
That's great. No, I mean, for me, I think that I moved over from one of your competitors from very, very high level superbike. And the two things that I found about it was, one was the comfort level was just incredible, otherworldly comfort level. And the other thing, which I don't know whether it's a downshift, it could just be conjecture on my part, but I felt the climbing on the bike, for some reason, it was a lot more like climbing a road bike. It wasn't stiff. TTs and obviously tri bikes are designed to go on the flat very fast. Not the best for climbing on, but I found the Ventum 1, and I live at the bottom of some pretty savage moorland hills, and she takes the hills like a road bike, and I was gobsmacked.
No, you're absolutely right. And we hear that quite a bit, to be honest with you. We hear that quite a bit. And also we hear it on the descent as well. It's like, wow, I can really control the bike on the descent. And for that reason is because most of the weight of the bike is actually underneath you. If you look at the meat of the bike it's underneath your hips, which we all know drives a lot of your handling. So all these things, you're absolutely right. It's nice to hear that.
So gravel, let's talk gravel. We briefly mentioned it at the beginning. Just a great thing to move into. Obviously, you've had the success of the Ventum 1, and the NS1 is mind-blowing road bike. But gravel, being the next addition to go forward, and obviously a sport or a discipline that seems to be growing and taking off. What's your sudden ideas behind the gravel bike and the GS1? And how closely was it linked towards the ideas on the framework of the NS1?
Well, very good question. The gravel bike, the GS1 is, I should say my favorite bike right now. It really is. I mean, I love all my kids, but I find myself riding that bike a lot more than the others. And so the idea is it was performance gravel. We looked at the gravel segment, which is the fastest growing segment or after e-bikes, but we don't really race e-bikes. So the fastest racing segment that's coming up in the US is gravel. And we looked at it and it was a wild, wild west. Again, just like triathlon, where we felt that the triathlete was being underserved through the technology used, we looked at the gravel segment and it was exactly the same way. People were taking cyclocross bikes. It was a mismatch of everything. And these gravel races are quite long. So, Unbound or the Wasatch Hall Road in Utah, that's 100 miles. Unbound is 200 miles. You're TTing at times, on those bikes. And so you have to look at aerodynamics. So we looked at the space and said, this is a wild, wild west. We got to bring the technology that we brought to the Ventum 1, the technology that we brought to the NS1 into gravel. And so our manufacturing techniques that we use are far superior. Now, it's a lot more expensive for us to manufacture, but it shows, it pays off. And so we looked at aerodynamics. I'm pretty sure we're the first company to ever look at aerodynamics for gravel. So if you look at the GS1, it's completely integrated. So there's not a single cable showing. Cables, especially in front of the rider, create a lot of drag. Behind the rider, the air is a little, and I'm being a little bit, I'm summarizing it a little bit, but the air behind you is a bit more turbulent, and so it doesn't affect you as much. But the clean air in front of you, a cable does create a significant amount of drag. And so these bikes were also the technology that we use double molds. So we use a mold for the inside of the bike and a mold for the outside of the bike, which makes cable management or cable routing cables very easy. It also gives us the ability to go lighter and stiffer. And so actually we had a magazine review our bike recently, and their complaint was that it was too light. And literally that was just music to my ears. I was like, this is the nicest compliment that I could have ever heard in my entire life. And so what we ended up making is a very advanced, lightweight aero performance gravel bike that I also carry road wheels on, and I will ride on the road. I mean, I ride mine everywhere. And it's almost, such a close call as aerodynamic as the NS1, which to have a gravel bike be that way. And by the way, the weight difference, I'm trying to think of mine, is about 300 grams between my two bikes. And I'm running 32 knobbies, thicker tires on my gravel. So as opposed to what I'm riding on my road bike. So they're almost identical in weight. Again, we're never going to come out and make a bike just to make a bike. Oh, we should get into the segment. Let's just make a bike. We look at the segment and we try to understand how can we make it better? How can we make a product that no one else is making? And it takes a village, right? And it takes the design house, it takes our factories, it takes our engineers. But most importantly, it takes experts. I hadn't started graveling until the GS1. I tried it here and there. So I am not the most equipped person to tell you how to advance the sport. And those are the things that you have to do is you have to have the real life experience, talk to the engineers and involve them early. And that's the same thing with the Ventum 1. That's right. We got real life experience of decades and decades and decades of experience to create the best bike possible. And unfortunately, if you don't link these people early enough, you're given the product after the fact, there's very little change or very little input they can help us with.
It's a great bike, a great product. We are literally teetering over here at the moment because we're waiting to get our hands on a GS1, which obviously will be coming very soon. We'll talk more about the launch in a moment. So while we're talking about new launches, not just bikes, but also Ventum Middle East, that's quite a venture. How's that all going?
It's going phenomenally well. Ventum Middle East did such a good job at almost recreating what we created in the US. And so their experience there is very similar to ours. They've mirrored from like the ability to build their bikes locally through the website. They have door-to-door delivery. One advantage that they have is that the region is a bit more concentrated, and
Yeah.
therefore, they have Ventum vans that deliver the bike straight to your door, fully assembled by the technicians. They switch your pedals from your old bike, they get your seat right, they measure you up, and they take you out for your first ride. So I would say their experience is almost more elevated than ours in the US. So it's been going really, really well, and I'm very proud of the team there. And they've really, they bought into the brand, and they are investing in the brand. And I think that is the best way for success. And so, yeah, couldn't be any happier. Looking forward to going back, hopefully this winter.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot on social media for the CEO challenge.
Yes.
What on earth has that been all about?
Absolutely. So the CEO challenge, it started actually when quarantine started, when the pandemic hit last year. I am on the road 90% of the year. And usually I don't have my bike, and usually I'm not eating well, and usually I put on quite a bit of weight. And the pandemic hit, and then I was stuck at home. So I said, hey, this is a perfect time to really get back in shape and and try to drop a couple pounds. And I was like, well, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I might as well involve others. So I started these CEO challenges where one week I put it out on social media. I said, look, ride as many miles as you can on your trainer. And I'm very competitive. So I wanted to make sure I would win every single time. And more and more people signed up, people with much greater athletic capabilities than I have. And next thing we had hundreds, I think almost 1,000 people by the end of the quarantine were doing weekly challenges. So I remember that first challenge, I did 1,000 miles in a week. And in order to do well, the last day I had to do 288 miles on the trainer in one day. And that was just brutal. And then, that was brutal. Hopefully not to be repeated. So then the next challenge was who can climb the most vertical feet, and so on and so forth. So the Middle East was following that last year and said, hey, we really want to do a CEO challenge. And so what we did is we had teams of five in the US and 5 in the Middle East. And we had to race each other to see who crosses to the middle. And it was, I think, 14,000 kilometers. And they crushed us. They did a phenomenal job. To be fair to our team, the pandemic is keeping us extremely busy. And so, as opposed to the first CEO challenges where there wasn't really, we were at a standstill, offices were closed. So it was a little bit more challenging for us, but they did such a good job and they took it so seriously. And it's just a great way to get the community involved. And by the way, all the top 10, we always send them, $100 gift cards to shop at Ventum or Swag or anything we can. And really the main reason to do it is just to get the community involved. Racing hasn't really come back to full speed yet. And it was just a way to keep people engaged and exercising and having that sense of community that we all get when we go to races.
So obviously, Middle East Open going well. We are, as a company, Neuff Red, really, really proud to have represented you in the UK for the last year. And I think that now we are absolutely blown away for the fact that we're going to be able to bring Ventum into the UK as an actual bike company and to represent you fully and be a distributor for you over here. So, basically your opportunity here to speak to your new potential Ventum riders and, what kind of message would you like to get out to the new riders?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, I couldn't be any happier that we were able to partner up. The UK market and the UK riders, you are such a strong community. And it's always been a dream of mine, honestly, since inception, to get into the UK. But it's not easy. And I can't pretend that what we did in the US is going to work in the UK. Just like I was saying earlier, we got to get the real life experience from the pros to develop and the people that do it every day to develop the best bike possible. It's the same thing. We need somebody such as yourself and your team to come in and get us into the UK. But I've been following athletes from the UK since I was a baby, and the community there is so strong. So I'm very, very excited. I would like to come personally, hopefully after the pandemic, and jump into group rides and hopefully not embarrass myself.
We'll certainly be happy to have you over here.
But I certainly cannot wait to be out there.
What's next? What is next? Are there any little hints that you can give us as to what is coming next for Ventum?
This is a loaded question. we're always developing, we're always evolving. I mean, if you look at our track history and what we've done and all the verticals that we're entering, I think it's a safe bet to say that we're going to expand into more verticals. You know, obviously now we're into trails. There's a natural progression there. There are, you know, bicycling is not just for sports anymore. Obviously, it's become really a commuter thing as well, mode of transportation. So there's some that we have to look at. But yeah, I would say without giving away too much, you'll see something this year. I'll leave it at that. You'll see something very special this year.
Magic. Diaa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully, you'll be happy to do this again. We'll have another further chat as things develop.
As well. Thank you so much for having me on. This is wonderful. And I really look forward to speaking again soon.